bling, 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 bong. Bling, bling, bling. Bling, 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 bong. Bling, bling, blong. Bling, 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 bong. Blong. Bling, 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 bling. Blong, blong, blong. Bling, 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 bling. I like how it's so out of sync with what I'm hearing and what's like actually, playing compared to the stream. That is, it's real fun. Alright. Stretch out to the chat. I did not update my bookmark. That's okay. Okie dokie. Alright. I forgot to make sure that was all good. You know what? It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Okay. Let's go to the camera. There we go. All good. Probably should have made sure to fully brush my hair considering I had my headphones on, so I probably should have done that. I guess in the meantime, like for a minute there or something, but that's alright. Hold on, let me actually, just for when I need to sit. It's not a pain in the ass. I forgot to move my armrests up. Alright. Hi. Hi. We're here after a really long wait. I mean, who would have guessed that it would take as long as a week to get back to a reading session? I'm sure we've never been here in a larger span of time than a week. Never done that before. But anyways, we're here. I wanted to do so on Monday, but I mentioned it on the React channel of wow. I've said it many times before, but temperature difference here in terms of how quickly it just changes and everything. It is like on a 12-hour coin flip, right? Where every 12 hours there's a 50-50 chance it's either ooh nice and chilly or boiling hot, right? Now at this time of year, obviously you want the nice and chilly because then it's like, well, it's not gonna be like winter sort of cold, right? It's not gonna be absurdly cold, where you gotta like bundle up and everything and all this sort of shit. Like, it'll just feel nice, right? That's what today feels like, which is great, right? It's what I'm happy I get to be here doing this now because it's like, yeah, today feels great, right? It's nice out. But uh, the problem is other times it's that boiling hot, and that's what Monday was, right? I wanted to do this on Monday. I wanted to double chapter on Monday and then double or triple chapter today, or even triple on Monday and then do double today, whatever it may have been, right? That was my goal here. And then the weather was the way it was. It was like fucked for Sunday, Monday, and then honestly a little bit going into Tuesday. Uh, which Tuesday wasn't as bad, it was, the whole thing of like, air conditioning can make it a lot nicer and all that. So it was a lot nicer. Unfortunately, I think I've said this before, I have the hottest room in the house. So it is like boiling hot in here, always, if it is hot out. Uh, and then on top of that, the air conditioning don't do much here. Like for my room specifically, it's not all that great in that regard. So yeah, that aspect of it isn't necessarily fun. But yeah, so that kind of made Monday impossible. I wasn't really gonna do it Tuesday. I think I want to say there was something that I on Tuesday that I'm forgetting about that I was busy with, and I think that's why I couldn't. I think it was both that and also the fact that it was hot, right? Because it's like that still didn't change the temperature for Tuesday. Um, But I think on top of that, there was also just stuff I was doing. Um, and then I wasn't going to yesterday because it was the reaction day, so it was like, I didn't really want to do it right after the reaction. I also felt tired, right? I felt decently tired at like halfway through the day, so I was like, yeah, maybe not. But today we are here. I intended to fully do this, and I was almost debating of like maybe we wait, right? Because the time already was about to be like 6:30 or something like that, and I'm like, I don't like waiting that long, and it's like later today, I'm potentially, well, Megumi, I'm potentially uh going to watch Cinderella Grey again. More so, group of friends group of friends and my brother, who haven't seen it yet. So it'll be my second time rewatching it because I've rewatched it once before with one of my friends, and then now I get to rewatch it again. Um, but it'll be my second time rewatching it. And that's obviously happening later, right? But I don't know how early later because I've brought it up before, and this is what leads into this problem, right? Is the fact that, oh yeah, tomorrow going into Sunday, I'm gonna be at a con, right? And I'm going with them. So it's kind of this thing of like, shit, well, we're all probably not gonna stay up too late or whatever it may be. Like either we're gonna cut it short when we're watching, or we're just starting earlier and then watching, right? And it's like, I don't know then, right? I was like, I don't know what we're doing, so maybe we have to like, worry about that stream wise. Um, and I wasn't all too sure, and I'm like, I hate doing it, but maybe I delay it, but I come with the benefit of doing a triple chapter or a quadruple chapter. I've done quadruples before. It's been fucking rare. It's once that it's happened. But I was like, maybe I do that, right? Triple, quadruple, whatever it may be. Do that for a stream next week, right? I don't know that it'll be as early as like Tuesday or anything like that. I think it probably actually would be Thursday again. But it's like, maybe I do that. But then I came to the realization I want to know what the fuck is going on, right? With current Arc 9, because we're done everything that's in there. Ye's fight is done. Uh, I almost said live for some reason. Roy's fight is done. Uh, Volcana Al fight is done. That's the name I'm hitting him with. Or Alcanica, I guess is the name I've seen a lot of people use. I guess Alcanica actually works better, but still, Alcanica's fight is done, right? Those three fights are done. It's just Al now. And I'm like, okay, this is what I've been waiting for the most, right? I want to know what the fuck is going on with him because he's by the geyser and there can't be much else. Other than maybe a backstory or something like that, there can't be much else here. So I realized, no, you know what? I want to know about that stuff. So here's the game plan for tonight, right? I am going to try and aim for 2 chapters. That is my goal. If we can squeeze it in, or if the friend group does not want to watch Cinderella Grey tonight, it just doesn't work out schedule wise and everything, which is fine, right? If we don't want to do that, uh, I can easily fit in a triple chapter in there, right? No problem at all. So, under those sort of circumstances, we can get a triple in. That's what I want to aim for. If we can't, oh well, right? If we only do a double, that's the intended thing here. Like that's why the title's the way it is. Because I'm expecting probably only a double. Also depends on how I feel, of course, by the end. But still, uh, so there's that, right? If I have to, I will potentially speed up my reading for the second one if I know it's getting close or whatever, maybe, or I get a message in regards to that, which I should actually keep my phone closer by just to know. Um, but yeah, depending on the circumstance for that, I might try to speed it up a little bit. We might cut it short, whatever it may be, right? If for some reason it starts after like one chapter, right? Like if they already want to do it after one chapter, fuck, I guess it would just end up being one chapter, and then I really will do like a triple or something like that, guaranteed next week, right? So there's that. Um, what else was I going to say with this whole thing? Yeah, I am going to just try my best to get through all this because I do really want to see more of what's going on here, right? We're at the real meat of this, I feel like. So I'm excited, but plans here change depending on how things go today. And of course, I don't want to be tired for tomorrow because again, I'm also going to the fucking con, right? I want to make sure I'm all good for it. Probably leaving decently later because I think it's like in the afternoon, right? But still, I want to be decently, ready to go and just being like, okay, you know what? Good to go. Let's do this, right? So there's that, right? I don't want to be too tired. So if I do feel like after 2 chapters I'm good, that's it, right? That's all I really wanted to say with this is that I have this general game plan going on here. Uh, I don't know how it's going to be, right? I can't say for certain what this stream will be like in terms of all that, but again, I do really want to cover a lot of this because I'm very excited, and yeah, I'm looking forward for what's in store with this. Plus, who knows? Maybe I run into people at the con that have like read this far and everything, and I get to discuss it with them. And as a result of having the triple chapter in there, I get to discuss even more regarding Arc 9. And then they'll spoil me on the ending, and I'll be like, shit, I haven't read that far. And they'll be like, oh, I'm sorry. And it's like, no, you're all good. I just, I didn't consider that when talking about Arc 9. And then that's the whole thing. It's kind of awkward a little bit, but then we drive it right back to talk about ReZero and how much we enjoy it, and then talk about random other shit, whatever it may be. I played Star Fox recently, specifically 64. That game's phenomenal. Uh, by my third playthrough of it, I managed to do the hard route perfectly fine. I mean, there was a few deaths in there, mainly retries, but that was fun. Anyways, let's get to the chapter. Let's fucking do this. Hopefully, I did this correctly. I didn't. 1 second. 1 second. I think now. Yeah, now it should. Okay. Yeah, I was worried that it was going to be the pop out chat. So what I will do instead is make a new window, and I will get the pop out chat from here. Go here. Pause that. I failed to consider. I never got rid of the cursor on this window, I'm realizing. So I now realize that this whole time, I mean, it's fine. It's not particularly anything big, but I do find it funny that this whole time I didn't realize you guys could see the little ogre cursor. That's kind of funny. All right, so nothing too big, but yeah. Okay, we are here. We are ready to do this. I am excited. Um, I've been wanting to catch up to R10 a lot because I've just been seeing more and more images about it, and I don't fully know them, but I've been seeing a lot of images with Krush with something there, right? I'll say that something there, uh, and I don't know the context behind it, so it doesn't feel like a full spoiler, but I don't know. I want to see what's going on there, so I do want to catch up pretty damn quickly. I do also have water on the side. I'm not gonna take like an I don't know where small break to be like, let me get water now that I'm done this. I did actually grab water ahead of time. I actually forgot to test it. You know what we're gonna do? I'm gonna grab a tissue and I'm gonna do this. We're all good. We're all good. I just let the dust off a little bit. There we go. Perfect. I just wanted to make sure. It's like, you know what? Let's test it this time. Probably could have used more than one tissue in case it was gonna spill, but whatever. It works. Okay, it's about damn time. Ah, I'm excited. Let's just do this. Let's just fucking do it. I'm making sure we're all good. Phone silent, I believe. Yeah. All that's good. Camera, mic, headphones are off. Wait. Okay. I was stretching to feel if they were off. All right. Let's do this. There's nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. Aldebaran recalled the witch imparting those words upon him as if it were yesterday. In real time, it would have been close to 20 years ago, but in terms of perceived time, it was completely different It was a completely different order of magnitude. This, hold on, right off the bat, this is interesting. 20 years ago, or close to 20 years ago, okay. Even if you remember, oh, I forgot to put a pin on the chat. Sorry, let me, now it'll stay on top. Oh, not what I meant to do. Apologies for that. I think we're all good. Uh, Even if he remembered the number of attempts he had needed for individual deadlocks, the game. He had not memorized the total number of attempts he had taken across everything. Not to mention, the amount of time that had passed throughout all of that would have been so outrageous that he did not even want to think about it. Only, it was an absolute truth that he was expending far more time than a single lifetime would usually allow. Be that as it may, even after going through all that time, it would be incorrect to assume that Aldebaran had reached the same mental state as the elves who lived for hundreds of years and are perennial youth. Sorry. We're already starting. If the human mind was something that started out as immature before eventually maturing enough to reach a state of aged wisdom, that was because the passage of time would allow one to experience both the sweet and the sour, granting the mind ample room to grow. But, hold on, got something in my eye. I'm good. Uh, but all the time Aldebaran had spent outside the passage of time or actual time was, so to speak, a series of stagnant moments used to break through whatever difficulty was laid before his eyes. In practice, those would range from a few seconds to a few minutes at most, and just by repeating those small intervals countless times, a human could not hope to grow. Ergo, Aldebaran believed that the accumulation, sorry, bit my tongue there while doing that, of time repeated by his authority was time spent in futility, something that had only ever served to abrade his heart and never to foster its growth. Even if it was time spent in such futility, when it got to the point of repeating several hundreds, tens of thousands, hundreds of millions of times, the brain would automatically begin filtering memories, attempting to rob Aldebaran of his genuine recollections. Nevertheless, a little bit further, there certainly existed memories that did not fade, recollections that, rather than his brain, seemed to be etched into his very soul, and the aforementioned words were undoubtedly among them. But then again, if in addition to the already lacking memories of all the time he had lived, Aldebaran were to also say that he did not even wish to remember all of it, he could picture that witch, the very incarnation of a curiosity who eagerly wanted to know everything, quietly muttering to herself, I see. What a shame. Although she boasted that she could not understand emotions, the witch was an expert at putting on an act to bend others to her will, and despite knowing that, Aldebaran could not defy the witch's words or attitude. That was the manner in which he had been disciplined, in which he had been reshaped. Were he to phrase it in such a way, it might have been a fair matchup against the inhumanity of the shinobi village that he had happened to hear bits and pieces about from Ye. In this case, it was a toss-up between whether it was the shinobi village treated as an equal to the witch, who were the crazy ones, or if it was actually the witch single-handedly contending against the entire history of the shinobi village, who was truly insane. Either way, the current Aldebaran was a product of the witch's creation. Even if you say that, you do have the right to live your own life. That alone is a domain that even a creator must not one-sidedly intrude upon. Hence, supposing you sincerely believe that you cannot follow me from the bottom of your heart, you may withdraw from the plan at any moment, or at any time, sorry. That is your freedom. On occasion, the witch would say such things as though to question Aldebaran's resolve. It was an unusual concern for a witch to bear. Fundamentally, once she had secured the other party's consent, the witch's usual strategy was to always maneuver in such a way that the promises she had coerced could not be taken back. In fact, among the lessons and assignments that the witch had levied upon Aldebaran, there had been plenty with contents nightmarish enough to have made him hesitate had he not agreed to not giving up in advance. Whether the witch made him do such things, she would never ask if he wished to stop once she had gotten him to agree. I'm having like a whole ton of moments here. Should probably take a drink. Further up, as promised. Okay, all good. And yet, when it came to the root of it all, his initial and most foundational resolve, she would often press him about it. Aldebaran interpreted that as potentially being the witch's own way of expressing her sense of guilt or inner turmoil. Oh, sorry. But was that really so? The witch proclaimed herself as unable to comprehend emotion. However, there was no way that she did not know the likes of rage, joy, and sorrow. If she was capable of expressing those sorts of human emotions, then would it not also be possible for her to harbor a sense of guilt or apprehension toward the future? At the very least, throughout the time Aldebaran had spent with the witch, even if there were times when he had thought her a witch incapable of comprehending the human heart, he had never once thought her a witch bereft of a human heart. In the interval between not having and not understanding, there lay a completely different landscape. Could it be that this simply manifested in the form of the witch's questions? If that were the case, then for each time she had voiced that question, had the witch perhaps felt lost? Lamenting the harsh path that she would eventually have Aldebaran walk, and desiring to respect Aldebaran's own will, letting him choose his own life, had such a turmoil existed within her. Maybe, just maybe, on the 1 in a million chance, on the 1 in a billion chance, the witch did not have such feelings. Ironically enough, that became the exact reason why Aldebaran would not go back on his resolve. Or did have such feelings, not did not. Therefore, I see. Hearing the same answer Aldebaran always gave, the witch's reaction had also been the same as ever. Perhaps he was being played. Perhaps from the very moment Aldebaran had been created until that day, the witch had been pouring ample amounts of time into brainwashing him. Perhaps the witch harbored none of the feelings of guilt or hesitation that Aldebaran had anticipated. Perhaps she truly was such a wicked witch. But even if he were to pose that question directly to her, the witch, putting on that beautiful smile of white and black, naturally, I am a wicked magician, after all. In such a manner, voicing answers that gave no clue as to their sincerity or deception, she toyed with Aldebaran. There we go. Alright. Interesting. Interesting opening. Not fully sure the contents just yet, but very interesting. And again, the 20 years part, or close to 20 years. Also, Because, like, I'm pretty sure we know Al is like. I, I know it's an obvious thing. It's like it's not like she's meeting him as a baby or some shit, but like it's interesting in the sense that we know Al's been around for a while, so 20-year gap here is interesting, especially because that's before some of the key events of the series. Even the ones that Subaru isn't directly involved with, like prior to his arrival there, we know that that's still before some of that shit. Um, I mean, shit, that would be before even some of the candidates at that, right? That'd be before their time as well. So that's really fucking interesting. I'm curious to see more about that. I think that's actually the thing that's intriguing me most right now. But all right, let's keep going. Whew. Basking in the roaring winds, Aldebaran glided through the air at furious speeds. He thought the sight of him spreading wings of stone on his back, catching the wind as he soared, would have looked terribly ridiculous. But he had no need to concern himself with appearances. As Ye held back their opponents, he would need to gain as much distance as possible, as well to eliminate the difference in elevation. Ooh, excuse me. Though, I can't imagine they were targeting my territory. Even as those words spilled from Aldebaran, he concentrated the majority of his attention on the formulation and operation of the stone wings on his back. The construction of the stone wings demanded an extremely delicate balance, with the size and hardness also requiring very fine adjustment. If they were too big, they would be tossed around too much by the wind, and if they were too small, the objective could not even be realized in the first place. Hardness and density were also tied to weight, so tuning them too much or too little would inevitably lead to a crash. Gotta hand it to Icarus for getting it right on his first try. And, and then he, did something, but sure. Uh, Speaking of taking to the sides with man-made wings, the one who came to mind was Icarus, the great predecessor who had fashioned wings of wax. Setting aside the fate he met, oh yeah, I mean, they literally bring it up there. The fact that his wings had not only been able to glide, but had been able to flap and carry him close to the sun, quite honestly filled Aldebaran with wonder. Just how many times had Aldebaran crashed on account of poorly constructed wings? I never considered that would also be the case. That he'd have to reset every time he's making them. Ooh, that's interesting. That would have been exactly what the opponent wanted. So after taking the problem again countless times, he had finally managed to fashion his current wings of stone. Even that was an intense feat that could not have been realized without utmost concentration and scrupulous caution, but couldn't afford to continue falling like that. The reality and his impatience, they were the greatest reasons why behind Aldebaran's ability to level up his level 1 stone wings with great haste, getting them to a level capable of flight for the time being. Although Aldebaran had confidence in himself as the user of an invincible authority, it was not as though his territory had no shortcomings whatsoever. Nope. Nope. There we go. The enemy's ambush on this occasion was something that inadvertently struck two of those weaknesses simultaneously. Strictly speaking, it could perhaps be better described as an attack of the same weak point from two different angles. For Aldebaran's territory, there existed a valid range of effectiveness. The teleport brought about as a result of the ambush had thrown Aldebaran outside of the established area of his territory. On top of that, factoring in that the destination of the teleport was a free fall from an extremely high elevation, I almost said altitude, but technically, it served as an attack against Aldebaran that would cause the destruction of the second territory. As a result, amidst his descent at furious speeds, Aldebaran had made sure to commit suicide before he fell outside the bounds of his territory, restarting from the middle of the fall many times over. Amidst those repetitions, he deemed that it would be impossible to break out of this high altitude situation, as he fell with his freedom of movement so severely restricted. After testing a variety of different plans, he arrived at attempting to escape on stone wings. At the very least, this slowed his descending change in elevation, allowing him to maintain his territory with relative ease. And just as Aldebaran had finished untying that troublesome knot, Al! Indeed, sharply calling out to Aldebaran as he exerted all his efforts to maintain balance, with the voice of a silver bell. Turning his head to glance back, from a considerably lower altitude than Aldebaran, he could clearly see the figure of an angel, no, of Amelia, flying in the same direction as he. Bearing wings forged of ice upon her slender back, she was rapidly closing the distance. Despite using the same method as Aldebaran, hers established an overwhelming lead in terms of their striking visual appeal. Unbelievable. He had hoped it would be clear that there was no helping the dumbfounded, nearly admiring groan that escaped him. A bit further, also let me take a drink. Holding it the slightly wrong way, but I mean, none of it spilled, so it all works out. But now I'm done with that, so I get to go to my water. The amount of hardship Aldebaran had endured to complete these stone wings, unshapely as they were, had already been described. Precisely because he had gone through all that effort, he felt respect towards Icarus and his wax wings. But, just like the Icarus of myth, Melia's senses had succeeded in crafting artificial wings on her first try, achieving the same result as Aldebaran, despite his innumerable failures. Rather than feeling respect towards that, he merely felt the definitive gap between them, furthering his sense of defeat. Even if the idea that I'm just a bumbling idiot who crashed over 600 times is slightly better than the idea that Lil Miss is a genius, it's not any solace whatsoever. The strength of Aldebaran's territory lay within its war of endurance, allowing him to persist over the course of an unlimited number of attempts, until even the slightest chance of victory arrived. His greatest advantage was his ability to continue playing the cards in his hand, until his opponent blundered, giving rise to a situation in which Aldebaran could gain the upper hand. However, while this also applied to his battle against Reinhard, there existed rare individuals in this world capable of consistently arriving at the correct answers. Those right answers would vary from person to person based on their individual abilities and their objectives for victory. But what they had in common was that, unlike Aldebaran, they all were loved by fate. Or they all, or they were all, sorry, my bad. I really should stop pausing with sentences like that because, like, realistically, I'm doing it correctly. It's just different. Aldebaran was hated by fate itself. No, yeah, I am really happy because I saw that shockingly the final volume for Arc 9 doesn't have a lot of chapters, and I was like, "Oh damn." But knowing that it's like, "Oh yeah, I can easily get caught up." I'd say maybe before the end of the month. How much do we have left in the month? Yeah, like a week. Yeah. Depending on how next week goes, we could be done by the end of May, which would be cool. I mean, honestly, some of the extra bits to ADT should actually be done around then, so it's fitting. I'm going to be able to drop the review, and then I also get to be like, by the way, here's the next arc of Act 2, now coming out every 2 days. Ooh, honestly, that'll be really cool if I can get that to line up. But yeah, I'm very excited about being caught up and managing to, see what's in here. And then Arc 10, again, I don't know what the fuck is going on. I've just been seeing images with like no context minus that one image I talked about. Um, but I've just been seeing images of Krush that I don't have full context on. So even though inherently it should be a spoiler with what I'm seeing, I don't know what the fuck it means. So I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to learn more. I've also been seeing a lot of melee art, and it's unrelated to Arc 6, I think, because I'm not seeing a lot of stuff in relation to Arc 6. So I'm curious about that. They got me doing the, you know, the eye emoji that people love to put on different gifs and everything where there's like a skeleton running by. They got me doing that right now. All right. It was no longer clear whether Aldebaran had come to despise fate first, or if fate had been the one to initially hate Aldebaran. But that alone was an unshakable truth, regardless of whether he was loved or abhorred by other things. Fate was Aldebaran's absolute enemy. Therefore, he had no choice but to slay it. Even if it meant making an enemy of the world, he would slay fate no matter what. But since it did not wish to be killed, fate had been sending its own favored pawns after him, one after another, in the form of assassins. Here and now, it had selected Emilia and Rem to act as its implements. Just my luck. A little bit further. Just who had it been to suggest that Rem should be chosen as the first surprise attacker? Regardless of who had proposed it, she was by far the most suitable candidate in terms of creating a momentary void within Aldebaran's mind. When she had been a victim of to the authority of gluttony, Aldebaran had failed to notice the abnormality of her existence as a result of that influence, unwittingly forming a proper relationship with her. Hence, after the death of Priscilla, the moment he had been hit by that flash grenade of memories and discovered that Rem had been released from the yoke of gluttony, his mind had been consumed by a much greater void than others. After all, he had come across a being who should not have been present here, one who by all means should have been dead. As for how that outcome had been achieved, there was no room for debate. Doubtlessly, he had pulled it off. In his struggle against fate, Natsuki Subaru had managed to conquer it. The power to do so dwelled within Natsuki Subaru. Rem's very existence was proof of that. But regardless, despite all that, he did not save Priscilla Burial. That's how you're gonna play it. I'm not showing any mercy either. Oh, oh, dude. You know what escaped me that whole time with Arc 7 and 8? I didn't consider the fact, for some reason, I didn't consider it. I didn't consider the fact that he wouldn't recognize Rem. I might have even mentioned that before, and that's my bad if I forgot, right? But like, I never even considered that he wouldn't recognize her. So then this leads to this weird scenario with Nine where he remembers her, realizes that happened, realizes that Subaru was able to, save Rem, right? And then still Priscilla's gone. Ooh, ooh, damn. But I mean, to be fair, Priscilla chose that, right? Ooh, excuse me. Which kind of the thing of like, I was not fully thinking straight in that regard. The tears he had shed, the fists that had punished him, the consideration he had attempted to offer, meaningless, all of it. After all, that which Aldebaran desired was neither tears, nor wounds, nor consolation. It was simply the life of a single person. Who, in his helmet, clenching his teeth to the point that he could taste blood, Aldebaran looked to his rear, as he simultaneously modified the angle and thickness of his wings, all the while keeping the drop in speed and maneuverability to a minimum. In midair, he crossed gazes with Amelia amidst her pursuit of him. The beautiful wings of ice truly suited Amelia, but no matter how cute of an angel she was, she could not flap those artificial wings to gain speed or elevation. She had gained her initial velocity from the recoil of Rem bashing the ice discus, but after that, there would have been no other method for her to gain on him. Yeah, ta, te. Similar to whenever she would launch an attack, Amelia raised those lackluster battle cries, and with each shout, her altitude and speed would increase by a step, and then another step higher. The methodology was plain and clear. Using her magic to create an icicle as a foothold in the air, she kicked off of it in order to gain acceleration and vigor. After a moment of stillness, the created icicle was kicked down towards the ground by the strength of Amelia's legs. However, it immediately dispersed into mana and returned to the atmosphere before being born anew as yet another foothold. Once again, she kicked off from it to boost her momentum, but by repeating this process, she had been able to relentlessly close the distance on Aldebaran. That's fucking ridiculous. Having an extraordinary sense for magic, it was a brute force solution made possible by her ability to get the most out of a vast supply of mana. Thanks to the path which linked him to Aldebaran, Aldebaran could draw from the power of the external mana tank. I'm flubbing up a lot right now. Known as the Divine Dragon. No, yeah. Yeah, that chapter was real damn good. I liked that chapter a whole lot. Like, for a character that you primarily, I don't want to say you primarily learn about, in terms of like side stories, right? Because technically speaking, yeah, of course, you learn about her throughout Arc 9 as well. But for a character that you primarily get the extra bits and pieces to via these side stories and you learn more about the circumstance, and then it's only now where you kind of see that whole background for her, it was pretty damn good. It's a pretty damn good chapter for Ye. I did like it a decent bit. It's a very long chapter, but a pretty damn good one. Ooh. But yeah, I mean, honestly, its length is what made it so concerning to like cover because it's like, dude, I without realizing that it was only going to take like roughly an hour because of how quick I was going with it, of how snappy I was. Uh, I was just totally worried with seeing like 11K words, and I'm like, oh shit. Right? It's like I need a proper stream where I'm cool with doing this, and that's it, right? And by the end, I was still exhausted, but it was like, damn, we did that a whole lot faster than I thought. So, all worked out. All worked out. Where the fuck was I? I just like legit like I looked back at my screen and just completely forgot. That's on me, really. Um, I was here, I believe. All right. Let me actually have one more drink because we've been breathing by this one as well. I feel like at least I have no clue. Ah. All right. It's not a question of monocapacity. It was just far too great of a gulf in their sensibilities and physical abilities. Even if he could bridge the gap in sensibilities through a limitless number of attempts, the gap in their physical abilities could not be spanned. The canyon stretched on for a great long distance. The cliff faces which flanked both sides of the two aviators stretched just as far. So long as they both continued in the same direction, Miller's pursuit would never cease. As Aldebaran grasped that reality, Mila kicked off a newly created icicle, and while there still existed some distance between them, her elevation finally matched his. Then, while keeping the balance of her ice wings, Al, I'm begging you, let's talk this out. I'll properly listen to what you have to say. That's what. That's what. I'm changing. I'm giving him like an accent out of nowhere. That's rich coming from you. Weren't you all asked questions later, coming at me and trying to freeze me with no mercy? If I had continued to fall all the way to the bottom like that, you were planning on freezing me along with the entire river, weren't you? But that plan already failed. You should be careful about being too upfront, royal candidate. The route of looking on passively, descending to the bottom with a surefire pattern of completely falling right into the opponent's trap. In order to escape that, he had gone all or nothing on choosing a path that veered away from the ice disk's falling trajectory. Even if he had failed to lose both of them at once, should he perhaps count the fact that that he had managed to split up Amelia and Rem as a whim? The answer to that, it's time to find out. My attitude from the royal capital still hasn't changed. Deciding to take measures to shake free from Amelia's pursuit, Aldebaran raised his hand aloft and created stones midair, assailing her with a barrage of such projectiles. Unexpectedly, the scene unfolded as if something right out of a shooting game had been brought into real life, and greeted by the barrage of stones, Amelia, with a flash of her wings. I'll say it as many times as it takes. I don't want to cry believing that there was nothing that could have been done about someone's passing anymore. Proclaiming so in a loud voice, Amelia plunged into the barrage, and the shrieks of the shattering and the freezing atmosphere resounded across the Agzad Canyon as a shrill melody. All right. Pretty nice. Pretty nice, pretty nice. Whew. Damn, it's already 7. Oh shit. Oh shit. I'm a little bit worried on timing now. I slowed down hard for this one. Damn. I was way faster on the previous one, I feel like. Because, like, we started about, 12 minutes in. Yeah, now we're 40 minutes in, right? So it's been half an hour. Surely, I don't like doing this. I genuinely don't like doing this, but hold on. Hold on. I want to check how far we are in comparison, just really quick, because I'm curious to see like timing difference. Okay, so we did about half. Yeah, weird, weird. That did only half. That did only half. That's strange. I don't know. That's thrown me off a bit. Huh. I kind of want to sit. I'm not gonna lie. I'm feeling like I want to sit. Honestly, maybe I should, considering I am going to a con tomorrow. Maybe that would be a better idea. Hold on. 2 seconds. Okay. You know what we will do? We'll sit. Down I go. I just think this is probably better. Let me tilt the camera down a little bit. That's good. That's good. All right. Okay. Yeah, I feel like it's just better if I sit probably for the rest of this, but all right. Damn. Yeah, it's only been half an hour for that much of the chapter. That's why I don't know what the difference was then between the previous chapter and this one. I really don't know. The reason for his existence as the following star was not something out that Aldebaran had ever worried about too much. After all, it seemed that at least once during adolescence, just about everyone would wonder why they had been born, wondered, wondered where life came from and where it faded off to, and experienced something like a rebellious spirit against their parents for no reason. But for Aldebaran, these were all notions that felt quite alien to him. Again, I'm blowing up a whole lot. In Aldebaran's case, it was a bit difficult to establish exactly who the parent he ought to rebel against would be. Due to the nature of his authority, he never truly got the sense of his life fading off whenever it was lost. When it came to the purpose of his birth, he had been provided with a precise answer, and for why he had been born, he supposed that perhaps the answer was love. And so Aldebaran had never grappled with the notions that ought to have been entertained during one's adolescence. Neither did he consider that some failure on his part, nor as something, or consider that, uh, nor as something that he had missed out on. In society, it seemed like there was the idea that people should challenge themselves with hardship while young, but experiences that would just end up becoming an embarrassing dark past upon entering adulthood held no actual value. It was fine to miss out on experiences that were not worth going through, just as how it was fine for death to be something that everyone only experienced once at the very end of their life. I see. So you have no desire for any emotions or impulses typical of adolescence. That is a bit of a shame. I've even been considering various ways in which I might deal with your rebellious phase, depending on how it might have manifested. That was the lamentation of the witch, and though he did not consider her to be lacking a heart, she often made such heartless comments towards Aldebaran, who had seen a quick upbringing without causing much trouble. For Aldebaran, the witch was the person with whom he had spent the most time since his birth, but she had a bad habit of wanting to bear witness to every single choice and emotion of humans, every last possibility. Furthermore, in a majority of cases, the inability to hold back such desires was in the nature of a witch. Aldebaran had been acquainted with witches other than her, yet, while it was to varying degrees, the fact that not a single one of them could defy that nature struck him as horribly blasphemous. Hence, the witch's attitude, awaiting Aldebaran's adolescence with an air of dissatisfaction, was something brought about by a nature that could not be defied, and when he thought about it like that, he could see that there was no helping it. Nevertheless, he saw no point in pretending to go through adolescence just to make the witch happy, in a sense that almost felt like the very rebellious spirit, indicative of adolescent emotions. As expected, maybe it is too convenient for me, someone who is not even a parent, to attempt superficially, to attempt superficially initiating such parental experiences. Man, what a piece of shit. That one created, or wait, 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 hold on, I'm locking in. Hold on. I'm noticing something here, and I don't know if I'm crazy, but I'm noticing something here. Let me highlight a little thing here. I was about to read the line, and then I realized if that one created Beatrice, were they perhaps able to experience it? Which? What the fuck? Wait. I forgot to turn my desk off. I'm trying to read through this and see if I'm misunderstanding this. If that one created Beatrice, were they perhaps able to experience it? This is not Echidna. This is not a kid. I thought this was Echidna the whole time. This is not Echidna. What do you mean? What do we mean? No, no, that's I'm trying to I'm really trying to grasp if I'm uh, that can't be Echidna then. Unless there are two possibilities, right? There's a possibility, unlikely, that at least to me, in my opinion, this is unlikely because how it's described and literally outright said. There's the whole thing with Beatrice, and that would imply that Beatrice is then not created by Echidna, right? That doesn't sound accurate. She calls Echidna mother, right? And on top of that, we have the description that they were created, presumably by her, right? I mean, there's Echidna the fox, right? There's Puck. There's all the like. There are spirits that we know are connected to her. Therefore, that has to be the case. At least that feels like it, right? That seems unlikely, but sure, we'll leave it to the side as a possibility. The alternative here is that this is just not Echidna, right? That Depay was having us walk this path and then being like, just kidding, it's this path. You're walking on this one now. Ah. I'm really trying to, cause like there's the obvious argument we can make of like Al has some connection to Satella slash the Witch of Envy, right? Let me pull this in. There's the obvious connection we have to that, right? But I don't know if that's the answer here. It could be. It very well could be, but I don't know if that's the answer. Fuck, dude. Ooh, I don't know. I don't know. This is interesting. shit. I'm trying so hard to think if there's anything else I'm not considering. Like there's other witches as well, right? That's by all means a possibility. It's just like there's other witches in that factor. There's also Pandora, right? There's all sorts of shit, but I'm also thinking about what Al says in Arc 8, and it's like, I don't know. I don't know. This is a little, not entirely sure. Damn. Yeah, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let me not move it too far back, but let's keep going. Oof. That is a crazy line to see. Because again, even if Echidna didn't view herself in that way, right? This is like this is the odd part, right? As the witch began to pose such questions to herself, Aldebaran was certain that this sense of loneliness he felt was completely unrelated to adolescence, and instead was something else entirely. Only it was difficult to seek a concrete answer as to why he felt that way, and the relationship was a bit too complex for him to ask. And so, just how the witch had established the relationship between Aldebaran and herself was teacher. And when he called out to her, the witch, in the midst of enjoying a stroll around the labyrinth of her own thoughts, lifted her face. Whenever Aldebaran found himself reflected in those black irises, seeing her hair of pure white cascading down her shoulders as she tilted her head in a "What is it?" So, hold on. I want to look something up. I want to look something up here. Huh. I want to see. Because you know what's confusing about that statement? You know what's confusing about that statement? Let me look at. Yeah, see. Hmm. Okay. Let me look at Satella. Yeah. Let me look at you. Oh my god, I know who his teacher is. We have been played like fools this whole time. Oh my god. Oh my god. Her hair is decently parted in the same way as well. Oh my god. That's why Echidna didn't add up. That's why. Because she mentioned Beatrice. She mentioned not being a mother. I'm like, that's weird, right? Because even if Echidna wouldn't view herself in that manner, she technically is. She accepts Beatrice calling her that, right? So that's weird. Ooh, excuse me. And then it said black irises. And here's the thing. That would let me move this close. Here's the thing. That would feel like a whatever line like almost like to pay for getting the designs if none of the characters had that, right? A big pivotal sort of point of the designs of ReZero is the fact that some have white irises and others have black irises, right? In terms of how they're drawn. However, that's going off how they're drawn, right? So I can't say that for a fact that it's going to weigh too much if like every character had white irises, or at least female characters or something like that, like the witches, for example, right? If every witch had white irises, that would be like, okay, he forgot, that's all good, right? Fine, whatever. When Satella doesn't, because she looks like Amelia, so yeah, Satella doesn't, and Echidna doesn't. And then out of all of them, Pandora has black irises. It's Pandora. It's Pandora. His teacher's Pandora. His teacher is Pandora. This is why I wanted to do this chapter today. I had a feeling that because we were going to learn about Al, I'm like, I want to see what's in store. His teacher's Pandora. This motherfucker was evil the whole time. Me going to the evil and menacing factory. And fucking chorus, I mean, he has a 40, right? Fucking. It's Pandora. It's Pandora. It's Pandora. It's so blatantly obvious Pandora. Wow. I said that jokingly in a sense. I thought it was possible, but I'm like, I don't know, maybe Pandora? I don't know if it would be, right? It's Pandora. Let's keep going. Casting down her shoulders as she tilted her head in a, what is it? You could not help but think about what an unfair witch she was. Even though she was always immersed in her own affairs, staying true to her desires without ever so much as trying to show consideration to the hearts of others, whenever Aldebaran called out to her, she would meet his eyes without fail. The fact that he had never felt any sort of adolescent, rebellious spirit against that which was but a matter of course. To begin with, the incentive to do so was shallow. Both his body and mind had long yielded to the futility of defying the witch. Purporting it as a performance testing to help him master the use of his authority, the witch had subjected Aldebaran to death over 1,000,000 times, and had already concluded her assessment of him. But then again, no matter how much he brought that up, the witch in question gave no meaningful reply, only responding, "I do not recall even a single one of those times, so even if you tell me to feel some responsibility, I am at a bit of a loss." Regardless, he could understand why the witch would go to such lengths. After all, at present, the only witch who still remained alive. After all, at the present, the only witch who still remained alive, not counting the one before his eyes, was the individual who had either directly or indirectly caused the death of all the other witches. Not counting the one before his eyes. The point of contact Aldebaran had shared with those witches was not something that had taken place during their time amongst the living. He could not meet with them anywhere outside of the finite space that had been prepared by the witch. By the time he had gotten the chance to meet them here or there, they were already long dead, their existences naught but gathered souls. Thus, as for the one who had done that to them, under the witch's instruction, Aldebaran would need to, he must kill her, no matter what. That was the reason for existing that Aldebaran, the following star, had been granted before even experiencing adolescence, the benchmark of his life that he would need to fulfill, even if it meant dying a million times. In order to make Aldebaran this way, the witch had been reproached by the other witches, having severed ties even with her companions, so her resolve would have needed to be absolute. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. Her act of speaking those words to him was something Aldebaran took pride in, and served as the very foundation of his being. In all honesty, he thought the witch had a horrible personality, and he had many reservations about her teaching methods and her way of giving instruction. But even so, he had no doubt that he would be able to live up to the witch's expectations. He had believed he would be able to do it. Back in those days, when Aldebaran still had his left arm, he had still been able to believe so. After all, even if he knew death, he had yet known true defeat. He had never experienced adolescence, but, unmistakably, that was a foolish dark past of his that could never be erased. That was the fucking interlude. I'm not trying to get loud out of nowhere. That was that wasn't even a cliffhanger. That wasn't even the start of a chapter. That was the interlude, and they threw that in there. To pay you... I think I've said this before about some interludes that are in there. You are an interesting motherfucker. You are an interesting writer with this shit. What do I say? What do I even say? I picked a great time to read this chapter, didn't I? Considering the previous episode I reacted to, and I literally made the joke of that fucking bird that I hate. Of course. Of course. Of course. Gee. As Amelia plunged headfirst into the incessant barrage of stones, Aldebaran stifled all the hesitation within his heart, mustering up his full, unrestrained firepower. As was also the case for their clash in the royal capital, Aldebaran had an instinctive weakness when it came to Amelia. At this point, it was clear that this was an example of weakness inherent to all life, and due to that, he had been unable to bring himself to take that sort of drastic measures he might have otherwise taken had it been a different opponent, even in the royal capital. Back then, he borrowed the strength of Aldebaran to hurl down a colossal boulder, preventing Amelia's pursuit of him by occupying her with the protection of the royal capital. But here, there was nobody else he could drag into the fray. In that sense, the decision to drop him in the middle of a massive canyon showed that she had clearly reflected on the previous encounter. Ooh, excuse me. Though, you're not exactly giving me enough leeway to appreciate your growth right now. Unfortunately, Aldebaran's heart was not currently relaxed enough to rejoice in the growth of himself or his enemies. For a moment, he felt reluctant to define Amelia as an enemy, but he forcefully shut his eyes to that. That resolve was something he had settled a long time ago, long before he had even met Priscilla. Even if, strictly speaking, the target of Aldebaran's resolve was not Amelia before his eyes, even if it's recycled resolve, it will still be about as useful as paper mache. Holding aloft that resolve, despite fully knowing it was but paper mache, he moved to sever Amelia's pursuit. Diving straight into the storm of rocks the size of fists, Amelia's ice wings boldly shimmered. The attack had intended to delay her movements, even if only slightly, by forcing her to evade or to take a defensive stance. But just as his unpleasant hunch had suspected, Amelia adopted the straightforward approach by taking the shortest path. The icy wings adorning back, icicles for footholds, and now firing stakes of ice to counter the barrage, fending off any that made it through the interception by parrying with the twin swords of ice in her grasp. The witch had taught him that the simultaneous activation of magic was difficult, even for a proficient magician. Oh my god, I just realized she called herself a magician. It's not Echidna, it's her. She called herself a magician. Oh man. Even if it was magic of the same attribute, the talent it required was akin to the unreasonable task, such as taking a pen in each hand and trying to write an essay with the right hand while attempting to draw an illustration with the left. When it came to different attributes, it seemed to require the drastic measure of adding an extra brain for each additional attribute, and Aldebaran had even seen the witch wielding 5 of the attributes at once. Honestly, it was to the point that he had seriously questioned whether the witch's smaller than average head, literally there you go, could truly house 5 small brains. Even setting aside that extraordinary digression, and even if they were all under the same attribute of fire, with the wings, icicles, ice stakes, and twin swords, the simultaneous activation of 4 varieties of magic was a sufficient feat in its own right. And adding on to that, in order to implement her absurd manner of chase, she had to put on a display of athleticism greater than that of an Olympic athlete, giving him the feeling that he had already exhausted his daily quota of surprise points. That's why I've got to meet her with minimal discomposure. Dude, I'm realizing how much shit Al was taught in terms of magic. That's like, oh yeah, even like some of the greatest don't know about this and all this sort of shit. And it's like, yeah, it's surprising that Echidna would teach a random person this magic, even if they're a student. It's surprising. That's because it's not Echidna. Of course. Amelia had opted to overcome the storm of rocks and stones solely for the courage and brute force. But setting that courage aside, what she would need to do if faced with a threat that could not be surmounted by physical might, or what would she do rather? Amelia was determined to close the distance, but in the face of the next threat, her cheeks tensed, unfolding before her all at once, providing her with no path of escape, were objects even tinier than the stone projectiles, an encirclement of gravel whose potential damage could be easily overlooked. Similar to leaping into a torrential rain, so long as she did not possess the absurd ability to dodge the rain while midair, it would be impossible for there to be 0 hits. Of course, it was not as though the only objective of that deployed sand was to obstruct her vision. Rather, it's heavy. Upon attempting to wipe off the sand that clung to her, Mila raised a voice of astonishment as she flailed her arms about. The grains of sand that had made contact with her arms, legs, and white clothes began to consolidate with the surrounding grains of sand, obstructing her movements through her heft and hardness. Or through their heft and hardness. It was a debuff attack he had also launched against Reinhard at the Sand Sea. Reinhard had torn free from it by breaking the sound barrier. Not even Amelia would be able to replicate that method. Moreover, my wings. The gravel's primary aim had been to hinder the wings of ice that sustained Amelia's flight. Having plunged into the sandstorm, the grit had eroded her frozen wings, stripping them of their intrinsic ability to catch the wind. Then, Amelia's balance crumbled, and she immediately started to plummet headlong towards the ground. To prevent that from happening, Amelia promptly discarded her impaired wings. By returning from being an angel to simply being an angel-like girl, she evaded the hardship. Purged. But that was precisely what Aldebaran had aimed to accomplish. Even though she had cast away her ice wings, it was possible for Amelia to deploy another pair of wings right away, allowing her to restart without losing any of her previous momentum or altitude. However, when it came to her physical abilities, no matter how unorthodox they may be, they would not allow her to catch up to an impromptu hang glider exceeding 100 kilometers, kilometers per hour. Sorry, I was just thrown off with the sentence being cut off there. Um, Henceforth, in order to prevent Amelia from deploying another pair of wings, Aldebaran doubled down, jutting out of the cliff face, accompanied by a rumbling roar. A colossal arm of stone attempted to snatch Amelia out of the canyon's sky. If that could hamper her momentum, then even if Amelia succeeded in forming another set of wings, she would lose the ability to catch up to Aldebaran's unceasing speed. Not to mention the number of colossal arms obstructing, or let me go further down, sorry. Obstructing Amelia did not end at just one or two. Utilizing the raw materials of the cliff faces, the rocky arms protruding out totals a count of several hundreds. Respect to Thousand Arm Canyon, or rather, feels more like a backstage of a haunted house. As a staple of haunted houses, a bunch of hands would suddenly pop out all at once from behind sliding paper doors. A similar impression to that. However, unlike the empty threat that those frights posed, these colossal arms were serious in their attempt to seize Amelia. If even one could just grab her by the leg, the chase sequence would be completely finished, and this do-or-die situation would conclude with Aldebaran's successful escape. Think you can, I'll do my best, get past this. As he attempted to finish those words, they were drowned out by her high spirits. He had not intended for it to be something that she could do anything about simply by doing her best, but Amelia's ability to do her best and somehow wind up pushing through was one of the most fearsome aspects about her. Having lost her wings, Amelia put that fearsomeness on full display. Swinging a glacial sword in her grasp, she hewed the fingers off of the first giant arm to approach her. Having neutralized it, she used it as a platform to perform her next leap. Her momentum had yet to perish. Her elevation, too, was recovering significantly. However, even if the behemoth arms did not quite reach the count of 1,000, there still numbered over 100 awaiting her. Soldiers, lend me your strength. Following Amelia's call, the ice soldiers, with their repugnant appearance, made their entrance once more. But further down, the soldiers of ice, who ought to have been shattered to naught during the fall of the ice discus, admirably stood up against the giant earthen arms swarming Amelia. Some used their entire bodies to stop them, some delivered punches to knock them off course, and some were crushed while striking a pose after being overpowered. They performed a diverse array of contributions. I just realized we're actually going to get that soon in the anime, aren't we? In a sense. We're going to get it at the end of Arc 6, but we're going to get it in a sense, and that's going to be fun. What irritated Aldebaran above all else was the individual who had taken Amelia by the hand, guiding her away from the evil clutches of the colossal arms, and flinging her forward to aid in her advance. The Natsuki Subarus of ice, 7 in total, would shatter whenever their duty was fulfilled, only to be born anew to serve Amelia. Repeating a cycle of destruction and rebirth, they never exceeded a maximum of 7 at once. Protecting Amelia from the hundreds of evil stone hands closing in, they continued to assist her. Magic was something that gave form to feelings and desires, that which had said as much. Let me take a quick drink, because I'm feeling it. Okay. All good. Yeah, damn, I'm already halfway through my drink, and yet, like my water, and yet this is like relatively close to what we were doing last time. Or not relatively close. There's a gap in words, right? It's relatively close in terms of water, but it's like there's a big gap in terms of words. He had thought that it had been a surprisingly romantic sentiment for the witch to have said, but considering how wind could take the form of a blade if one wished to slice up their opponent, and how flames akin to a crimson lotus could be birthed to scorch everything in a rage, there was likely no room for debate that it was but a manifestation of feelings and desires. In that case, At this moment, the sight of Natsuki Subaru-shaped ice soldiers aiding Amelia before Aldebaran's eyes, just what sort of desire could it possibly be the manifestation of, made his stomach churn. That was not in a figurative sense, but rather was unmistakable, true meaning. Or was the unmistakable. As those negative emotions boiled within him, Aldebaran linked together the next attack. That was... Sorry for rehashing the same punchline, but it's the return of my trump card. Upon speaking those words, in the air above Aldebaran, Amelia and the ice soldiers filling the breath of the Agzad Canyon to its fullest, an enormous, mighty boulder began to hurtle straight down. An inescapable crushing force by a tremendous mass, with the second coming of the trap he had set back in the royal capital. Damn. What had been desired, nay, what had been required, was but a singular victory in his life. It would not be an exaggeration to say Aldebaran's life existed solely for the sake of that victory. Since the very moment of his creation, every gift bestowed upon Aldebaran, every lesson poured into his vessel, every blessing graced upon him, all had been ordained for the sake of guiding him toward that victory, to ensure that he would rise, claim it for his own, and stand exalted in triumph. The weight and significance of it all were things Aldebaran had fully understood, or so he had thought. However, when the hour came for his conviction to be tested, a tempered resolve, those carefully wrought plans, his very soul, refined to perfection as it ought to have been, all of it was rendered meaningless. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I have created. Those words, bestowed upon him by the witch, had been the benchmark of Aldebaran's life. So long as he heeded those words, no obstacle placed before him could ever hope to halt his advance. And so, the thought that he might one day lose faith in the witch, he would never utter it aloud, nor ever wish her to hear it, but that notion had always seemed utterly impossible to him. Thus, in accordance with the witch's words, he had convinced himself that he would never be defeated by anyone. The day that faith was shattered, in a sense, was the day Aldebaran had truly died. Death. That was something he had experienced so many times that even keeping account seemed a fool's errand. And though he had always considered keeping count to be a fool's errand, he did so anyway. Simply because he had been told to. Yet even as he kept track of the actual number, the absurdity of it all never faded in the slightest. Even so, he believed that on that day, at that moment, he had tasted death in its truest form. Having gone so far as to build up Aldebaran for the sake of her dearest wish, the witch had prepared him for the sole battle in his lifetime that he would absolutely could not afford to lose. And yet, at the juncture where you could not afford to lose, you were defeated. The familiar plain of lush, verdant grass and the form of the witch sat by the white table of the tea party, enjoying the aroma of tea. Upon seeing her, see, this is what confuses people, because it's like we see this and we think Echidna, and then it's not. Aldebaran was immediately stricken with despair, crushed by the depth of his own sin. Employing only black and white, the highest pinnacle of beauty that could be achieved with the witch, and now, the fact that there existed not a single wound upon that odiously attractive figure of hers, was proof that this was indeed a world of dreams. After all, see, that's the part where it gets weird, because it's like employing only black and white. After all, when Aldebaran had failed to win the battle he had needed to win no matter what, the witch had sacrificed all four of her limbs to shield him, leaving her a wretched figure able to do nothing but await death. As he had stared at her in shock, Aldebaran had found himself vaguely thinking the painfully obvious. Even the witch had red blood coursing through her veins. The heat, the odor, the feel, the blood could not have possibly been a lie. In that case, this world, where all that had been lost, where make-believe had been painted over the reality that should have been, was not more than a blatant bundle of lies. Make-believe. I'm rather unfond of that expression. While strictly speaking, it is not the same word, I cannot help but be reminded of an unpleasant individual. Whether that witch's own way of joking, or if she had just wished to express how she felt regardless of whether it was an appropriate time to say it, Aldebaran was unable to grasp the witch's true feelings, even at the very end. Only, He was convinced she hated him, or perhaps in despair, he thought she might have completely forsaken him. However, your arm, it seems unlikely there is any way for you to get it back. See, now I'm like, hold on. Let me do one more check. Let me do one more check. I want to make sure I'm not considering, or I'm not failing to consider any other option here. Hmm. I was also looking away for a second just to make sure. Yeah, because I don't know, because yeah, Echidna has white pupils. She's got white pupils, so like again, it can't be her. I think it straight up just has to be like I'm looking at each of them. Because like yeah, Typhon sure, but it wouldn't be her. And then yeah, again, Pandora has black pupils, or I guess irises, but you know what I mean. Or wait, oh no, no, sorry, I'm stupid. I'm stupid. I thought it said my brain registered it as pupils. It said iris. It said uh see now I do look like a fool. Now I do look like a fool, because it wouldn't be. That would line up with Echidna. That would be black irises. I just made up some shit in my head by doing this because I failed to consider that iris is not pupils. I'm stupid. That said, one of two alive, and this is 20 years ago, is interesting. That's interesting. So I guess it would be Echidna. That's my bad. That's my bad. That's my bad. My bad. But that is weird that it does say 20 years ago. I misunderstood completely. I realize that now. Yeah, had I realized the irises part, I would have considered Echidna. But okay, fair enough. It is Echidna. I just misunderstood. Okay. See, now I do feel like a fool, but that's all good. Clarified it for myself in the same stream at the very least. Right. Didn't make a like review and then also put that in there. All right. Might actually do one because holy shit, it's about to be 8 o'clock. Fuck, I wanted to do two, but I might end up just doing one. The witch's gaze fell upon Aldebaran's left arm, taken by the shadow from the shoulder down. There was no pain. That only served as more proof that this place was the witch's castle of dreams. Were he to return to reality? Ooh, excuse me. His brain would likely be scorched by unimaginable pain. And that was something that could no longer be overturned by means of death, a true injury that would never fade. Robbed of your arm, you lost the battle you could not afford to lose. It appears as though my plan has ended in failure. I can just picture my friends saying all sorts of things. Ultimately, it shall be left up to those who seek to carry on Flugel's will. How frustrating. Interesting statement. Thought that his defeat would take everything from the witch was unbearably painful. Without seeking anyone else's understanding, she had parted ways with her fellow witches and the companions who had journeyed alongside her, all so she could attempt to fulfill her wish. But Aldebaran had ruined all of that. The cruelest part of it all was that, even though he understood that much, the passion and determination he had carried before his defeat would not return to Aldebaran's hollow soul. Having lost a battle he could not afford to lose, Aldebaran's heart had been shattered. The sole battle in his lifetime where defeat was not permitted had ground Aldebaran's heart to tiny little pieces. That was by witnessing the inevitable death of the person closest to him in this world. The witch, Aldebaran, would likely suffer a wound beyond recovery in the truest sense. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I've created. Hence Aldebaran did not understand the meaning of those words spoken to him once more. Now that it has come to this, we do not need to we need not concern ourselves with the appearances any longer. Let us change the victory conditions. We shall leave them to deal with her. Meanwhile, we shall focus on preventing secondary damages, which was both wise and selfish. A little bit further. Disregarding Aldebaran, who was still left at a loss, his mind unable to think straight due to his immense feelings of guilt, she came to a conclusion all on her own, leaving no room for objection as she forced the conversation along. The altered conditions for victory, the newly presented objective of preventing secondary damages. Regardless, he did not believe that was something he could accomplish. After all, Aldebaran had already failed. He had failed, and yet there is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. Aldebaran could not fathom what had caused the witch to say that. Without saying much to Aldebaran, still stunned as he stood affixed in place, the witch rose and began slowly walking towards him, before coming to stand face to face with him. The witch's face, the one he had gazed upon more than any other in his lifetime. On it, there emerged an expression he had never before witnessed. Your stars were bad. It was not Aldebaran's fault. He could tell that was the meaning underpinning those words. Before he could come to terms with the emotions welling up inside of him, the Castle of Dreams abruptly came to an end, akin to tearing up the very paper stage of Kamishibai. It was a terribly violent manner of conclusion. That which awaited him on the other side was a grim reality. That instant, his brain was dominated by pain and feelings of loss, fresh blood, and the din in the air undermining his comprehension. The heaven and earth had been stained with a black so somber that there no longer existed any semblance of time, and Aldebaran's wails were drowned out by the screeches of the world crumbling, unable to reach his own ears. Merely, in a world where just about everything had fallen apart, despite being in the midst of a cacophony so loud he could not hear his own voice, he somehow managed to properly hear that blurred, frail, gasping sound. A voice he wished to not let slip, the witch's final incantation, Ol Shamak. The next time Aldebaran's consciousness returned was after everything had ended, or rather, when that which had been ended began anew. And that new beginning came to a new end, before beginning and ending all over again. It seemed like after that that had repeated many times, over and over and over again, the world had been left without any traces of the witch. Whether it was due to a difference in preconditions, or simply because it had been performed by the tremendous power of the witch, the shock he felt at how the spell's efficiency differed from what he himself had wielded, it lasted for only a moment. Hey you, where'd you come from? Who are you? The question was delivered by the voice of a person completely unknown to him. That man, dressed in attire that was every bit as shabby as Aldebaran's disheveled appearance, stared at Aldebaran with trepidation and caution tinging his eyes. The words he could understand. The expression with human interaction was scarce, but in a sense, that was not the problem either. What mattered was figuring out where he was, and when. Ginnon Hive. It's Gladiator Island. Which? That's the thing from like 100 years ago, right? The man seemed puzzled. The man seemed puzzled, as if he had been asked something strange, and receiving his words, Aldebaran let out an exhale. Gazing over that, the man's expression shifted from puzzled to startled. After all, his exhale morphed into sobbing. Aldebaran crumbled to the ground, a flood of tears streaming down his face. There is nobody in the world who can defeat you, you whom I have created. The words of the witch, whom he had left behind hundreds of years in the past, still clung to his soul, refusing to let go. For the sin of having turned that person into a liar, Aldebaran had wished to die, but die he could not. Wow. Okay, yeah, so again, I got that wrong. That's my bad. That's wild. That explains it. Okay, that explains the confusion here, right? Because okay, me misreading irises and all that, fair enough, right? I perceived that as pupils for some reason, and my brain's like, well, Pandora's the only one with that, right? So fair enough, that was on me. But the confusing part was the only one alive other than Satella, like that implication, right? And I'm like, that's fucking weird, right? Because if we go off the basis of who's currently alive, 20 years prior to this, it's Pandora Satella, right? That's what made it founded in some evidence to me, prior to that whole understanding. So it seemed odd. But now with the understanding that, okay, Al is from way further back than we thought at all, right? Uh, yeah. Wow. Fuck, dude. So yeah, Al is way older than that. Uh, that did that. Yeah, I was gonna say this name did sound slightly familiar. Uh, unpleasant individual, I guess, can be Pandora or the Saintus. Yeah. Which, yeah, I mean, funny that, Pandora. Oh, that was a fuck up I had there. Yeah, huh. Yeah, and then there's a kid now. See, this would have just proven me to be a big old dumbass. Here's what I'm gonna do. I hate to do this. I don't actually expect to do the other because I took way longer, especially because my dumbass tangent talking about, wait, I think I have the answer. No, you don't. Yeah, 7,000 words. It's just that took us an hour and a half to get through. We didn't even spend that much, talking around. We spent about 10 minutes, but that was like way longer than I ever expected it to take. And I'm a little worried about that. I went to the wrong tab, so I'm going to be a little bit laggy there for a second. Yeah, I don't know. Let me double check some things. Let me double check. Okay. 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 I'm glad I double checked. I have good news. I'm gonna go on a quick break, and we will be back. But we are gonna do more. There's actually a change of plans, so we're all good. That's fine. We will be back. So I'm gonna go on a short break. Yeah, we will return. So BRB. Oh, sorry, I got a little bit more distracted, gamers. Some of my Mii's got married. Hooray! Alright, because it's getting dark out, let me set this onto light mode. I was debating on, like, because I was feeling a little tuckered out. I'm like, should we keep going? But I feel like it is fucked up if I go on this long break and then I come back and be like, hey, no, we're gonna end off with that. So, I think we'll keep going. I mean, is that the worst in terms of the next, chapter's length? I think we should be alright. Especially now that there's a change in plans, it should be fine, but I don't want to exhaust myself too much, so we're definitely not doing a triple. I will say that now. But we'll do this one without issue, anything like that. We will do it. No problems at all. Alright. Let's do this. Just right into it. Sort of a rehashing the same punchline, but it's the return of my trump card. Also, let me make sure our audio is good. Yep, audio looks all good. Okay. Upon declaring so, a boulder of immense mass came hurtling down from straight above. His plan designed to be not more than an unoriginal rehash. Aldebaran watched as Amelia's expression shifted mid-flight, evading the colossal stone arms reaching out toward her from the cliff sides. But as widening her eyes at the sight of the massive boulder, and as the regret of having completely allowed Aldebaran to escape at the royal capital emerged on her cheeks and her canvy, she firmly held her eyes shut to ensure her heart would not be claimed. Actually, just remind me, there's one thing I just want to quickly check. Hold on. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. I was double checking something. Let me have this message to send. All right. I'll look at the answer in a bit. Or actually, let me clarify something with it. All right. I should be all good. All right. Just making sure. Just making sure. We're all good. All right. Firmly held her eyes to shut, or her eyes shut, to ensure her heart would not be claimed by the same sense of defeat. After a momentary feeling of weakness, spent wondering, can I really do it? The giant boulder was reflected in her reopened sights. She fired herself as if to say, I have no choice but to do it. facing forward with even more strength in her gaze than there had been before that moment of doubt. These many shifts in her expression had transpired over the course of a single second, so it was incredible just how quickly she regained her composure. Motivation alone ain't gonna cut it. Scraping and chipping away at the craggy cliffs of the canyon, the giant boulder plummeted. The first maneuver Amelia attempted with her renewed motivation was to conjure a massive ice cap in the trajectory of the falling boulder, in order to catch its weight. However, Aldebaran countered by firing a stone cannonball with his magic, blasting through the canyon, blasting through the canyon wall to nullify her gambit. The jagged wall is demolished. The ice cap could no longer fit perfectly across the canyon's breadth, merely becoming another falling obstacle alongside the massive boulder. In that case, as soon as she saw that ice cap had failed to catch the boulder, Mila immediately moved to the next countermeasure. Once again, carrying wings of ice upon her back after they had been purged, she enacted the rebirth of an angel while bending her long legs. Then, positioning the soles of her feet on top of the legs of the ice soldiers kicking up from directly below, receiving the leg strength that the original Natsuki Subaru could never have mustered, she soared through the air. Caught off guard by Amelia's ferocious acceleration, the hundreds of arms emerging from the cliffs all failed to catch her, allowing the angel to escape. No, allowing her to charge Aldebaran. While Aldebaran had been diverting his focus to intercepting her, his momentum had fallen, allowing for Amelia's rush forward to rapidly close the distance. Ye had been left behind to buy him time, but he had completely forfeited the advantage she had created for him, so he could hear her bitter voice saying, "Trying to support you is pointless, Al-sama. Though, that's only if I get caught here." Returning to the imaginary words of Ye, Aldebaran met Amelia's charge with a barrage of stone bullets. But Amelia sublimely twisted her body through the air to avoid the next rehash following the falling boulder. Seriously? The fact that she had accomplished that with artificial wings, that by no means should have allowed such freedom of movement, left Aldebaran aghast. Naturally, the angel's wings made of ice could not be flapped. The true origin of Amelia's three-dimensional maneuver just now were smaller ice wings that had been added on below the main ice wings. By overlapping several wings of ice, she had yielded a change in how they sliced the wind, providing functionality that allowed her to aptly edge control by tilting her body. Even that aerodynamic solution was undoubtedly accomplished by the natural senses. "I'll catch up." Even if she veered side to side in order to evade, Mila kept her loss of speed to a minimum. As she exclaimed, the distance between the two of them vanished. At that speed, Mila would likely make it out of the falling boulder's blast radius in time. With the blow he intended as a trump card so easily sidestepped, Aldebaran's situation was truly dire. Or that was what should have been the mutual perception of the two parties involved. Mila's large amethyst eyes opened wide, painted in a color of shock. From her point of view, Aldebaran had not taken any exceptional action. While he still continued firing a volley of stones that failed to hit her, neither had he deployed any new magic, nor had he performed any extreme maneuvers to evade her. The same went for his response to Amelia's flight, momentum bolstered by borrowing the strength of the ice soldiers. At this rate, she would catch up to him, and he would no longer be able to avoid her freezing fingertips. That was to say, Mila had met her victory conditions in this situation. Nevertheless, there was no delight or satisfaction to be found in Amelia's eyes. That was because, didn't I tell you? Same punchline. A colossal boulder plummeting down, in exchange for the prevention of the damage it would bring about. Aldebaran had been allowed to escape his battle against Amelia in the royal capital. Hence, even if uninspired, he carried out a plan that had already proved successful once. However, this time, there were no innocent people here who would get caught up in this. Indeed, no innocent people. "Al!" As she shouted, Amelia recklessly reached her hand toward Aldebaran, toward the sole being other than Amelia who would be caught in the wrath of the falling stone. Yeah, I also realized while I was on break, I was thinking about the whole kidnapping, which I still do feel embarrassed about in a sense, but it's like It's such a weird way she describes herself in a sense because again, she doesn't think of herself as a mother in that like way, and it's like that's weird because she made Beatrice. She says like person that that created Beatrice, right? Like she words it like that. So it's like, wait, so you aren't involved? Like I would have assumed it's you, Echidna, but then what's going on here, right? Like that's a bit of a confusing sentence to see, and it's why I'm so thrown off. I think it's why, you know, that misunderstanding had, come to fruition because it's like I saw that. I saw what was the other line that I saw that really yeah, the alive line, right? Prior to finding out that many years had passed. It's like I don't know, right? It's weird. I couldn't fully comprehend what they were going for in a sense. So maybe there's more to this than we know, right? But I don't know. It was a bit of a confusing statement to see, and I think that's what really played into that sort of thing. I clicked on the wrong thing. I'm just trying to take peeks occasionally, see if I got any response. No. Okie dokie. That's all good. Back to it. That settles it. You've done well to survive Sparka. I assume this is going back to Owl's origins because yeah, this would also be some of the stuff involving this would involve some of the stuff involving EX5. So that's interesting. Done well to survive Sparka. From this point forward, you can count yourself among the gladiators of this gladiator island. Welcome him aboard, you damn good for nothings. The raucous welcome and cheering were indistinguishable from the sound of angry jeers. Following that reception, Aldebaran fell to his knees and leaned against the massive corpse as coarse and vulgar cheers engulfed the arena. He was languidly resting against the remains of a witch beast, the guilty law that had died from the sword deeply piercing its thick neck. Having lost its right foreleg along with both of its rear legs, the guilty law had died with an expression that conveyed bewilderment and confusion more so than it did agony, because of the territory. Beholding that pitiful, deathly visage, Aldebaran was taken by a deep sorrow as his shoulders heaved with ragged breaths, though he was immediately disgusted with himself for how terribly deceitful that sympathy was. Managed to survive, huh? Color me impressed. Greeting the tattered Aldebaran was a man of shabby appearance. He was a gladiator of the Gladiator Island, the very one who had found Al when he had initially woken up. The man's expression was complex, likely because he found it utterly incomprehensible that Al managed to survive the rite of passage for newcomers, Sparka. From his perspective, having been ordered to tend to Aldebaran's needs as the unlucky person who had first discovered him, he might have felt that Aldebaran dying in the Sparka would have prevented those troubles from dragging on for too long. Regardless, Aldebaran's survival had been a shock to the man, but he was not the only one who had been surprised. Aldebaran, too, could not hide his astonishment at his own survival. Having suffered defeat in a battle he could not afford to lose. Hold on. Okay. Having suffered defeat in a battle he could not afford to lose, Aldebaran had been left deserted in these foreign surroundings. Sorry. An unknown environment, unfamiliar people, and rules lacking sufficient explanation. To Aldebaran, this was certainly an uncivilized land, as if he had been cast into a brand new world. Like the title. The only thing of which he could be certain of was that he had likely lost all value in his own existence, and that he would probably even lost the only one who would have mourned his loss in worth. That was why, even though you said you wanted to die, guess that was all talk. Equal parts sarcasm and spite, the man's words carved deeply into Aldebaran's heart. With the defeat of his first battle, upon realizing that he had survived the end that surely ought to have awaited him, Aldebaran was consumed by unceasing feelings of loss and remorse, yearning for death from the depths of his heart. That was why Sparka, the trial by which newcomers were tested on the Gladiator Island, seemed all too convenient for Aldebaran at the time. The blunt offhand explanation had been mercilessly unkind, but in short, they were forced to put their lives on the line for trial by combat, reverse, uh, where for any who had failed to prove themselves as gladiators, death alone would await. because this is also where they sent to execute people. For Aldebaran, who could not help but wish to die, it was far too convenient. Uh, sorry, I was just looking at the text for a second just to see if I like misread something. Uh, in fact, when Aldebaran was taken to the arena along with four other newcomers in the same circumstances, and thereupon forced to face off against a guilty law, he had fully intended on being killed without offering up any resistance. But despite all that, Aldebaran had survived. The other men fought back, ran away, or pleaded for their lives, only to be slaughtered all the same, leaving Aldebaran as the last man standing. The witch-beast's claws tore into him, shattering his ribs as it trampled him underfoot, and he was supposed to have met his death there, blood frothing at the mouth. And yet, there is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. In the instant those words had flashed through his mind, Aldebaran had expanded his territory. Compared to the opponent he had challenged hundreds of millions of times, yet still could not overcome, this Sparka, which only managed to kill him 304 times, was no agony to Aldebaran whatsoever. After all, the true agony only came after, the self-questioning that haunted him for having survived. Why? What for? For what reason had he not died? You want to hear about the outside? Even if you ask me, it's been a long time since I arrived here. Recognized as a gladiator, Aldebaran had gained the right to live on this island. Within the island cut off from the outside world, he had learned that this was a part of the Wallachian Empire. The gladiators imprisoned here, forced to fight in death matches for spectacle, as the public order on the island had collapsed. But there was still much more he wished to know. As a result, the one subjected to Aldebaran's persistent questioning was the gladiator responsible for taking care of him. If you say it's not about anything recent, if you say it's not about anything recent, but history you want to learn about, I don't know all too much about it either. Yeah? Well, if it's about a witch, I at least know about the Witch of Envy, but when he had asked just to be sure, he was first surprised that the gladiator had even known about a witch, and recited as if it were too terrifying to speak aloud, the witch's legend as it was known today. It delivered onto him an even greater shock, for the tale had come to refer to only one, the Witch of Envy. The Witch of Envy, who, threatening to plunge the world into ruin, had been sealed away by the hands of the free heroes. Sorry, I don't know why I put great in there. I mean, it sounded natural in a sense. This world possessed no legends of any other witch, and records pertaining to the witches of sin were nowhere to be found. Moreover, hearing that it had already been nearly 400 years. Sorry, I'm like, hold on. Quick drink. Quick breath. Let's just. Okay. Feel like I'm going a little fast here. Where were we? Moreover, hearing that it had been nearly 400 years since those events had transpired, Aldebaran fell into despair. 400 years, that long passage time, had erased any traces of the witches of sin from this world. But to think that it would go so far as to even forget the existence of the witch, the very witch who had attempted to fulfill her promise, even if it meant giving up everything. But what was even more cruel? Witch of greed? Hell's that? Some kind of delusion of yours? Aldebaran had no words with which to respond to that man's suspicions. There's no way it was a delusion. The days Aldebaran had spent alongside the witch were certainly present within him. Her teachings, the touch of her fingertips, the words she had spoken to him, he remembered all of it. In this world, against the witch who had concealed dreadful power, there had certainly been another witch who had attempted to fight back. Aldebaran was her student, and he was the witch's trump card. Shit, the fuck's wrong with you? Even though all I did was answer everything you asked, you start swinging at me out of the blue. So spat the man who had been struck by Aldebaran, the latter enraged upon being denied the existence of the witch. Having been tossed into this environment, into this brand new world, that was how his relationship ended with the benefactor who had first shown him kindness. With the other gladiators as well, things broke down in a similar fashion, isolating Aldebaran from his fellows. A deviant enthralled by the witch. Many times he had heard such rumors about himself. It seemed that his benefactor had taken the initiative to spread them around, but in a sense, it was a valid assessment. He had no intention of correcting it. However, it aggravated him to be likened to some incomprehensible group known as the witch cult. Upon asking, it seemed like they were a group who heralded the revival of the witch, going around and committing acts of terrorism all over. Once more, he flew into a rage, demanding them to not lump him in with such individuals. But this only caused his reputation to be tarnished even further. Witch-crazed nut like you'll never die a decent death. During the death match arranged at the discretion of the then governor of the Gladiator Island, those were the dying words of the first benefactor to show him kindness, slain by the barbarian sword in Aldebaran's hand. My nose is fucking itchy right now. Wiping the blood of his benefactor off of him, Aldebaran took a moment to ponder those final words of spite. You'll never die a decent death, before nodding deeply in agreement that there was no doubt about those words. With his territory going strong, Aldebaran had continued to survive his death matches on the Gladiator Island. Those who called Aldebaran a witch-crazed nut were all eventually pitted against him in death matches. Without fail, they all fell before his barbarian sword. He did not care about enacting revenge, nor did he have any desire to clear the witch's dishonor. To begin with, rather than being dishonored, the fate that had befallen the witches was that of having their very existence erased. Hence, Aldebaran did not seek a reason for its continued survival from the witch. Only, he wished to learn why he had been allowed to live. In order to ascertain that reason, he could not afford to die. Surviving the initial Sparka, continuing to survive the death matches thereafter, it was all for that purpose. And so, using his territory, while suffering hundreds of deaths each time he crossed blades with an opponent, he trampled the lives of all sorts of gladiators underfoot, and lived. He lived, and he kept living. Or he kept on living. And then, you've done well to survive. I take my hat off to the devilish luck that allowed you to best even one so far above yourself. Indeed, upon witnessing the triumph of Aldebaran, who had grasped even the most infinitesimal... my fucking throat right now. Ugh. I'm really starting to slow down. Okay. Indeed, upon witnessing the triumph of Aldebaran, who had grasped even the most infinitesimal chance of victory in order to slay an opponent who had utterly outclassed him, the governor voiced words of praise that were not discernible as either astonishment or admiration. Casting aside his broken barbarian sword, Aldebaran turned his back to the arena, scarce on cheer as it was. From the moment of his awakening, his first decade of the Gladiator Island went by in a flash. Let me check, because I'm curious, right? Especially right now with how much I'm, occasionally just stuttering. I think it is good to check, just to know. Okay, we did about half. Let's keep going. Good to note. There's nobody who can defeat you whom I created. Those 10 years were long, relentlessly scraping away at Aldebaran's humanity. The face, voice, and warmth that he ought to have had vividly recalled whenever he closed his eyes were instead being painted over by the deathly visages, deathly froze, and a cold blood of those he had killed with his own hands. There is nobody who can defeat you whom I created. That was correct. Those words were correct. Certainly, nobody could kill Aldebaran. For over his past 10 years on the Gladiator Island, he had been summoned to Sparka on many occasions, faced countless brushes with death in the arena matches, and had come to kill many of the experts and inhuman beings who utterly outmatched him. In response to Aldebaran's repeated upsets, it was not merely once or twice that the death matches were arranged to try and kill him. And since there was a promising gladiator killed on those occasions, Aldebaran had begun to acquire somewhat of an untouchable status. There is nobody who can defeat you whom I created. After a decade, the faces of the Gladiator Island were completely different than when he had first arrived. Aldebaran had long since become one of its oldest members, and there no longer remained a single person aware of the rumors that he was deviant and enthralled by the witch. Ever since Aldebaran had learned of the taboo regarding the subject of the witch, and the fact that most people did not know anything beyond the surface of the legend, he had completely stopped bringing the topic up. However, that was not a change brought about by such things as disappointment or resignation from not getting any of the answers he desired. Rather, it was something far more serious. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. For 10 years, forced to fight to the death while stranded on the Gladiator Island, in a place where transactions of life and death were repeated and nauseum, what had consumed Aldebaran was a sense of immense despair. Had the witch truly existed, it was a despair that called her very existence into question. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. If he closed his eyes, he could certainly hear that voice. He remembered it being spoken to him. But even so, was that truly something that had happened? There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. The witch's face he could no longer recall. The witch's voice he could no longer recall. The witch's warmth he could no longer recall. For 10 years, his recollections wore thin, like a videotape he would watch back whenever he had a moment to spare. Even if he tried to splice the torn tape back together, playback remained impossible, with even the tape itself eventually turning to dust. When the memories themselves scattered away in such a manner, and the dust completely fell through the gaps between his fingers, Aldebaran was no longer able to tell. Had the witch truly existed? Were Aldebaran's memories, were Aldebaran's memories events that had actually happened? There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. At times, he would feel an overwhelming urge to destroy his own existence. Whenever that happened, Aldebaran would enter a deathmatch whilst deliberately undoing his territory by allowing himself to be thoroughly beaten up with his life truly at stake. He would attempt to gaze into the abyss of death. No, not only did he gaze, he would even think about just letting himself fall in. However, only on such occasions the territory would save Aldebaran by taking on an unexpected form. There is nobody who can defeat you, you who I created. Let me take a quick drink, because I'm feeling it. Alright. As if to validate the words of the witch, who possibly did not exist, there were several times when an opponent on the verge of killing Aldebaran abruptly succumbed to the mental collapse right before his eyes. Each time an opponent's eyes went white, having lost both sanity and fighting spirit alike, Aldebaran would feel as if there was some invisible force keeping him alive, and overcome with frustration, he would lop off the opponent's head. Even after a decade, Aldebaran still did not understand the purpose for which he had been kept alive. On the contrary, he was not even sure if there really was anything that had tried to keep him alive. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. Only he was terrified that everything that had shaped him was a lie. The witch's efforts and words had truly never existed. That Aldebaran truly was just a lunatic enthralled by the witch. With such self-doubt gnawing at his heart, he had endured many years of sleepless nights. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. Those words once served as Aldebaran's lifeline, the very foundation upon which his being apologies. For which his being had been shaped, but now they were terrifying beyond recognition. This was all just a product of his delusions, that the duty Aldebaran had carried, the encounters and partings he ought to have had, might have never existed at all. Such doubts only continued to haunt him. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. An unending spiral of self-questioning, a sensation as if he were mirrored in a swamp of unanswerable, bottomless despair, sunk up to his chest and unable to move. And so, that in time, which only the manner of his death remained unsettled, seemed as though it would stretch on forever. However, on a certain day, Aldebaran's long days of stagnation quite suddenly arrived at a turning point. The turning point being, "Hear me," rabble scattered across the Gladiator Island. EX5. Booming through the speaking tubes across the island was the voice of a young girl, tinged with heat, as fierce as flame. Nice. The simultaneous revolt of the gladiators and the plot to assassinate the new emperor by using that revolt as a diversion. That seemed to have been the reality of the turning point that had befallen Aldebaran. Be that as it may, there was no way all the details would have been granted to a mere gladiator of the Gladiator Island, nor did Aldebaran even want to know any further details. For the time being, since there had been no change in the management of the island, he simply assumed that administration had not been overthrown either. At the very least, a change of emperor at this point in time was not something Aldebaran had known about. But if there was one thing during this incident that had caused Aldebaran to truly feel a profound transformation within himself, it was obvious. He had rescued a silver-haired girl who had fallen into dire straits. Of course, that incident had nothing to do with Aldebaran's original objective. The silver-haired girl was a young dog person whom he had happened across, and she had no connection whatsoever to the silver-haired individual with whom Aldebaran had been involved. However, the fact that he had saved that girl, and the voice of the flame-like girl amidst the revolt that had demonstrated an attitude of selfishly following one's own path, had allowed Aldebaran to make up his mind. He would venture beyond this closed-off world in order to verify the existence of the witch. There's nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. After being killed over and over again by the aquatic witch beasts let loose in the lake, Aldebaran finally escaped the island, which had held him captive for over 10 years, disembarked on a land that was not surrounded by water. Strictly speaking, the world as a whole was encircled by the great waterfall, so it could be said that there was actually no land that was not surrounded by water. The fact that he would come up with such a quip like that showed that he was still able to at least fake some cheer. There's nobody who can defeat you, you who I created. Quick drink. To Aldebaran, those words were a malediction, a consolation, a binding, and a forgiveness. In order to discern the color, the heat, the certainty of that ambiguous and directionless wellspring of such overwhelming emotion, Aldebaran had decided to pursue the traces of the witch. There was not much time to spare. During the decade he had spent on the closed-off island, the world Aldebaran walked had unexpectedly been drawing closer to the world Aldebaran remembered. All that remained was to ascertain whether the things within Aldebaran were genuine or not. And so, what was required to ascertain that was evidence of the witch. For what reason does the gospel hold no account of your existence? Speaking those words was a Sin Archbishop of the witch cult, who tilted his head far more than necessary. Although Aldebaran had a rough idea as to the reason why, he fiddled with the metal fixtures of his helmet and gave an evasive comment. The jet black steel helmet he had begun to wear in those days was a parting gift he had taken with him from the Gladiator Island, and he found that its sturdiness and full-face cover often came in handy. It seemed like this profusely loud and animated Sin Archbishop, or Sin, yeah, Sin Archbishop, I was thrown off for a second, did not take kindly to the fact that there was not a single account of such a conspicuous person in his oh so precious gospel. You truly are slothful, aren't you? Interesting that they've met. In all honesty, the battle against the Sin Archbishop was among the most challenging encounters of Aldebaran's life. To begin with, winning without dying a single time was something he lacked experience in, but even so, this was a formidable enemy who made it difficult to seize any chance of victory. In the end, while he might have been satisfied with the conditions of victory, he did not win. Even when compared to the witches of sin, to the women who, just like the witch, potentially did not exist, his viscousness seemed to stack up favorably. Or, sorry, not viscousness, viciousness. I don't know why. Viscous. Anyhow, there's nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. With his honor preserved by those words, and having secured the information he desired, Aldebaran had pondered. In order to ascertain the existence of the witch, the ones most likely to possess the information he sought were members of the heretical organization he often heard about even on the Gladiator Island, the witch cult. They seemed to be a group who hid themselves away in places completely unknown. but that was only if one was attempting to track them down, as luring them out was not particularly difficult. Certainly, if rumors were to be spread about the Witch of Envy so worshipped by the witch cult, there were some who would come rushing towards I keep trying to say toward as if it's there, to the scene. But then again, if one could not handle whatever came rushing their way, they would simply suffer through the world's most foolish way to die, being mercilessly robbed of their life. Must cease at once. That is blasphemy. Satella, any other than Satella. To speak of any witch other than the Witch of Envy, the height of sacrilege. As the one who graces me with the favor of her love, she is the only one worthy of once more descending upon this world. Her alone. He knew not just how much credence he could give to the utterances of the Sen Archbishop, whose aberrant demeanor and conduct bereft of sanity had accumulated to an extremely vast amount. But even if that madman's ramblings held no meaning to anybody else, they held meaning to Aldebaran. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. Tenaciously retrying his encounter with the Sin Archbishop, he would draw out the words, engage in necessary back and forth, and give up his life each time he triggered a fit of rage. Then back to beginning. By single-mindedly asserting that process, Aldebaran obtained the information he desired from the Sin Archbishop. Then, passing right by the Sin Archbishop, would come rushing to the scene. He had made it so that their encounter would never happen, or had never happened. Ah, sloth, 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 sloth. As Aldebaran evaded the witch cult's encirclement and absconded, he pictured the Sin Archbishop. He pictured the Sin Archbishop letting out a blood-curdling shriek after failing to catch him. That was no longer mattered to him. Like a dog jump scared me. At this moment, there existed but one desire within Aldebaran, the confirmation of the witch's existence. Of how the lives of the Witch of Sin had been extinguished, he was aware. The Witch of Wrath had perished in madness after being caught in a trap. The Witch of Lust had been immolated in a great fire. The Witch of Gluttony had withered to death in the sea of sand. The Witch of Pride had drowned in a great flood. The Witch of Sloth had fallen into the great waterfall as she massacred the dragon. The Witch of Envy had been sealed away at the edge of the world, and the final witch, see, the ability to enter this place from outside the tomb is quite structural flaw, or is quite the structural flaw indeed. Just like the mechanism of the sanctuary, finishing touches are rather lacking, though I suppose some aspects that were unavoidable. Yeah, or some aspects of that were unavoidable. Sorry. A plain of lush, verdant grass beneath an unrealistic blue sky, stretching out as far as the eye could see, as a cool breeze blew across. A white table and parasol were placed atop a small hill. Unmistakably, that was the scene of the memories which had been on the verge of fading from within Aldebaran. Present, right at the heart of it all, was a beautiful being who had been described with just colors of white and black. Why must love fade? After many twists and turns, he finally made his homecoming to the Castle of Dreams. Doubting his own sanity, Aldebaran had almost believed that it might have been an illusion. A reunion which spanned over a decade for the student and across 4 centuries for the other party. With her existence verified, the witch, nay, the Witch of Greed, wearing a smile bereft of blood, voiced that celebratory remark. Damn. Okay. We're getting more. We're learning more. Actually, a little bit more. Surely this is it, right? I feel like that was like a pretty fucking long section. Again, I'm not trying to rush towards the end. I'm just like, I'm making an ass of myself with some of this. So I am curious, and then also I feel like we are just outright. Yeah, we barely have anything that's left. This is probably the last section, most likely. All right. Here we go. All right. Aldebaran had lived a life with one arm longer than he ever had with 2. Hence, he hardly ever felt much of a handicap for only having his right arm, but regardless, he still found it to be an inconvenience on extremely rare occasions. For instance, times when he had no choice but to carry an unconscious person. Please bear with the ruggedness. carried in Aldebaran's arm as he uttered so, held together with the magic stone forged prosthesis. Yeah, because that'd be prosthetic, all that. Uh, was a limp, unconscious body of Amelia. Interesting. Amelia's aerial chase of Aldebaran that had commenced in the vast canyon had come to a conclusion with Amelia collapsing due to Aldebaran's use of foul play. It was nothing substantial. The trump card was the same one that he had played in order to escape Amelia's clutches back in the royal capital. Amelia, kind-hearted as she was, could not allow anybody to be lost in the midst of battle. She too was one who, with the passing of Priscilla during the Empire's great disaster, had sustained a deep wound to her heart. Therefore, in order to protect Aldebaran, who had remained in the trajectory on course to receive a direct hit from the falling boulder, she did not hesitate to throw herself in harm's way. Even though there wasn't any other way to reliably land an attack on her. It's a scummy strategy, even for me. Of course, that was Aldebaran's conclusion after having attempted various other stratagems in trial and error. He had tried adjusting the positioning of the boulder's fall, smashing the boulder to create a rock avalanche, setting its trajectory with a barrage of stone projectiles, and incorporating all sorts of different magic. But outside the stratagem of using himself as a hostage, Amelia always managed to find a flash of inspiration, an intuitive judgment for the circumstance, admirably surmounting all of them. None of the foolish Aldebarans who had enacted those other stratagems had managed to avoid a future of being frozen by Amelia's fingertips, so it could be said that he had no other means but to rely on such a desperate measure. Though that doesn't make the guilt go away, nor does it mean I'll be forgiven. An excuse for no ears save his own, so childish that not even Amelia could forgive it. Shielding Aldebaran, Amelia defensively brushed the mass of the huge crag, and as the powerful impact ran through her entire body, even she would let go of her consciousness. From what he could tell from appearances, it did not seem like she had sustained any lasting injuries, just a strong concussion at worst. To ensure that was the case, many careful adjustments had been made. Seems like I've been put on quite the detour. Waiting on Ye wouldn't exactly be the smartest move now, would it? Now that the high altitude fall and the chase sequence of Amelia had ended, he finally had enough leeway to ascertain his surroundings. What he gleaned by doing so was that this place was likely the Agzad Canyon, the largest canyon in the entire world, and the fact that he had been placed at a significantly different elevation from his destination of the Grand Mogolad Geyser. They were already past the national border with the Kingdom of Lagunica, and were well into the Kararagi city-states, but it would take a considerable amount of time to climb back up to the thousands of meters he had fallen so that he could return to his original route. Besides, setting Alter aside, is it even possible to reconvene with Roy and the old man? Oh yeah, like Alcanica, yeah. Quick drink. Okay. Amongst the henchmen he had pulled ahead from, he had no anxiety regarding Aldebaran's strength, but he was greatly concerned about the abilities and humanity of Roy Alfred and Hankel. Of course, Roy's actions were restricted by the curse mark, so he would not break the rules if he valued his own life. Either way, the best I can do is expect everyone to gather at the meeting spot. The maximum priority for Aldebaran was reaching the Grand Mogolad Geyser and accomplishing his objective. He would need to borrow Aldebaran's strength for that objective, but in the worst case, it was not as though he had no means by which to do something about it, even without Aldebaran. In addition, the power of Roy's authority of gluttony was indispensable to dealing with the aftermath of the calamity he had employed for the sake of this plan. Hence, he would need to find a way to reconvene after he fulfilled his objective, and somehow get them to follow his instructions. Trying to avert secondary damages alone to cause terror to... hold on. I started there and I really shouldn't have. Trying to avert secondary damages only to cause tertiary and quaternary damages. Some help I am. Spilling those words, Aldebaran inclined the wings of stone on his back, and while maintaining his speed, he slowly descended towards the bottom of the canyon. By the bank of the great river running through, he somehow managed to make a smooth landing. That was a lie. He had crashed and burned 6 times while carrying Amelia. On the seventh attempt, he finally succeeded in landing. It'd be a laughing matter if I became unable to get back on my feet here. One time, he had been incapacitated not only in his legs, but from his waist down, which brought him dangerously close to total paralysis and made him incapable of gulping down his poison. He had managed to roll himself into the river and drown to death, but he did not wish to repeat that same failure. In any case, sorry, Amelia, little miss. To ensure she would not drown if the water in the great river rose for some reason, Aldebaran laid Amelia down not on the ground, but in a cavity of the cliff face that was a bit higher up. And in his final comment before leaving her there, he slightly hesitated on how to call her. Hesitating, he ultimately settled on referring to her, as he usually did, as Aldebaran. Now that their relationship had lost its rightful form, he did not have the courage to address her in any way that pertained to the true relationship between the two of them. Right after cursing his cowardly self, Aldebaran was struck by a dizzying headache, clenching his teeth. Having overcome a difficult situation, the moment he let his mind relax, the debts he had accumulated began threatening to erupt. Doing his best to hold that back, he gave himself 10 seconds to take deep breaths before gulping down his poison. Repeating that over and over, he stabilized his mind. Albeit, even if he could give his heart a breather through this method, it was unable to grant a rest to his body, and in particular to his brain. In real life, he had already kept his brain constantly running for nearly 100 hours. Along their journey, Aldebaran had used its healing magic on him to conceal that reality from his mind, but until his body and mind completely shut down, this overheating would likely not subside. Be that as it may, he persuaded himself to just hold out for a little bit longer. There is nobody who can defeat you, you whom I created. Ah, that's right, teacher. Nobody can defeat me. That's right. That's precisely right. He closed his eyes. Those words were resurrected within Aldebaran's mind. Using that as a support, Aldebaran would, look at that. It is mine. Mine. Fragmented and indistinct voice sounded within him, to whom it had belonged when those words had been spoken, and just how deeply they would scorch his soul. Since he knew the answers to all those questions, Aldebaran closed off his ears to his heart. He would not hold his tracks, so he had decided. His mind was made up. After all, he could not afford to hold his tracks, so he had decided. His mind was made up. So, the moment was just after Aldebaran, having closed his heart's ears, had at least managed to climb up out of the canyon, resuming his hurried march towards the Grand Mogulad geyser. And thus, what escaped from Aldebaran's lips was a husky exhale. It was only natural that he had let such a voice slip or spill. Guess what we're doing? All right. After all, it was an accident that had flown in from outside his consciousness, an unforeseen event he had dismissed as impossible in the back of his mind. In Aldebaran's path, around 2 meters ahead of him, a behemoth of an icicle had been pierced. Swallowing his saliva, Aldebaran looked back down at the bottom of the canyon. He understood that Amelia, the one left down there, had been the one to plunge to this extremity of ice here. But the damage she had taken was severe. It would still be a few hours before Amelia regained consciousness, so in other words, this was a Hail Mary she delivered whilst unconscious. That's some serious outrageous persistence. Regardless, considering that, if Aldebaran had climbed up only 5 seconds faster, he would have been crushed under this ice pillar just now. It could be said that he evaded tragedy in 2 senses. Of course, even if he had suffered a direct hit, Aldebaran would redo it with his authority, and draw out the result of not getting hit. But, for both Amelia's sake and for Aldebaran's peace of mind, it would be best if she did not have the chance to intervene from here on out. Even so, in battles, it's something that'll crop up every so often, but it's damn frightening. A little bit further up. Even in the sparkles of the Gladiator Island, in the midst of life or death battles, there were times when the opponent who had sustained a fatal wound would muster all the life force left within them, unleashing an attack that would aim to bring him down with them. Among Aldebaran's experiences, there was even someone who tried to kill him after having their head sliced off. Actions with resolve to accomplish what they had set out to do, such that even if one's consciousness or life were lost, the vestiges of their feelings left behind in their limbs would attempt to carry out their will. Amelia's Hail Mary just now was the form taken by her feelings of wishing to stop Aldebaran no matter what. And so, wait. As he attempted to praise her force of will, Aldebaran held his breath. Before his eyes, the ice pillar had barely missed Aldebaran to thrust itself into the ground. That was a colossal spear of ice, one that seemed like it might be wielded by a giant from legend. But for that to have been fired with the objective of killing Aldebaran was far too much of an exaggeration, no matter how one might see it. Something this massive, it was just as if an anchor. Indeed, it happened right after he had let that mutter slip. With that ice spear Amelia had fired as a landmark, new assassins were dispatched to Aldebaran as he attempted to push towards the Grand Mogulad geyser. That was, yo, helmet bastard. Looks like you got roughed up pretty badly while I wasn't looking. I could say the same for you, and it almost seems like you've wound up with quite the foul mouth, haven't you, Laura-chan? Having each surmounted their preliminary battlefields, they were fellows who had risen to the next stage. Combined forces, headed by Filore Lugunica, no, by Felt, just like when they had hit him with a flash grenade of memories, they now stood in his way once more. That's some beautiful art. That was pretty good. Ooh, this is exciting. And we're still going. Oh, man. Oh, dude, the art on that is crazy. The art on that is crazy. Warlock versus Witch is also a very interesting title. I'm I'm gonna try and look at numbers. I want to see how much we have left. Let me go here. I know I'm gonna be very dark for a moment here. Let me just again. I'm gonna try to avoid as much as possible. Let me get rid of that. Let me actually go back and also like all this art. Hold on. This, and then I'm just gonna like this one ahead of time. I don't care. There we go. I guess you know what? That's actually an older piece a little bit, so works out. No spoilers in the caption or anything. Yeah, so let me... No, what I should do is I should go to here. Right, hold on. And we go to... That new art on Arc 5? I remember it getting new art, but this art also feels brand new. Huh. We want this one. And... Okay, I saw the number 59 there, and then there was two more. So it is actually going to go up to 60, which is all right. That's all right. But yeah, I guess in that case, it's like, okay, so we still do have about 8 more chapters or something like that, which is like, okay, that's still pretty decent. That's still pretty decent. Yeah, so we will do more. We will be back at some point soon, right? Oh, I'm in the darkness now. Oh. I'll try and actually just keep this here a little bit just so I have some light. Yeah, we will be back. Definitely not this weekend, right? I don't think I'm gonna do one this weekend. I don't know about Monday because Monday's probably just gonna be a cool off day. Tuesday's debatable. Tuesday's a maybe, but we'll see on that, right? I think the most likely option is next Thursday. So next Thursday we'll probably be back. I'll try and do 2. Let me see how long this one is actually while I'm at it. I want this site, and we put that in there. Yeah, okay. I mean, if that's 7,000 words and the next one's not that long, by all means, I will try and get, just 2 in for next week. And then, yeah, I mean, I was hoping that we could be done by the end of the month, and there's technically potential for that if the other chapters are short, but I don't think that's happening anymore now that I'm actually seeing this and thinking about the time between that. If we could do Tuesday, maybe, right? I'd say if Tuesday is a possibility, I could maybe do more on Friday and then Sunday and all that and whatever it may be. But we'll have to see, right? We'll have to see how that goes. Don't hold me to that, right? But yeah, I mean, we're getting there. We're making some good progress. So almost fully caught up on that. We're good to go through Arc 10. That would be very exciting. This was good though. Apologies for me occasionally. Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, apologies for me occasionally flubbing up stuff here, or also the complete Pandora misunderstanding because I didn't realize what was going on, and my brain substituted the two words, and it was like, man, ah, wish that didn't happen. I'm a little off my game today, but that's all right. That's all right. With that said, though, we're gonna end off here. It's already like 9:40. Might as well, right? Again, don't want to be up too late because all this stuff. So, thank you all for joining in, watching, whatever it may be. I don't know. You could be watching this in the future. It's fine. I'm gonna head out here. So take care. Have yourself a nice night, nice day, whatever it may be. Right? Great day actually, or great night, either or. Stay safe, and I will see you all with the next stream or the next reaction. It's the reverse of what I said on the reaction channel. So